Rome had seen it had seen ambitious generals, scheming senators, and gods in human form, but nothing prepared it for Caligula. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, he was nicknamed Caligula, little boots for the miniature soldier as sandals he wore as a child in the camps of his father. The great general, the two grew up together, sharing a nurse and a bed, and were said to be extremely close. Caligula was furious about the rumors. Anyone who spoke of his alleged affair with Drusilla was chased out of the city or put to death. He showered her with gifts, including expensive perfumes and garments, and he even lavished honors upon her attendants and freed women who served her. But given that we don't have any records of the birth itself, it's possible that the pregnancy ended in miscarriage or stillbirth, especially since there are rumors that Caligula forced Drusilla to abort. When they arrived, the emperor personally carried her coffin into the city, draped in black. He built a pleasure boat large enough to carry 800 guests, equipped it with prostitutes, caged women. After all, Drusilla had always been close to his counselors, and had an intimate relationship with some of them, which led to speculation that she was involved in plotting against him. For example, when Agrippina the Younger was summoned to attend to Drusilla's corpse, she supposedly found poison in her bedroom and immediately fled. Or consider that when Cassius Chaerea tried to kill Caligula, he was protecting Drusilla. Some scholars speculate that Chaerea was actually in love with Drusilla, which explains his fierce devotion to the emperor's sister. In chariots, then rode it across the Bay of Naples and unleashed poisonous snakes into the audience at the gladiator games. His actions practically define the term too much of a good thing. But remember, without Drusilla, he might have been remembered differently, and now you know her story. The horrors continued. He hosted feasts inviting 8 men of only one type, bald, short, or fat. At another banquet, he invited 8 handsome young men who had never shaved their underarm hair. He surrounded himself with poison tasters and bought poison from gypsies. Everyone expected him to die, but instead, it was his own grandmother, Julia Misa, who poisoned him. Caligula was stabbed 30 times in a corridor by his own Praetorian guards, but he remained conscious for 3 days. Throughout Rome, people wept and prayed for his recovery. But when he finally died, his physician, a former slave named Xenophon, was accused of poisoning him and executed by the He held a lavish funeral for her and erected a golden statue of her on the Palatine Hill. There he gathered the Senate and made a speech, claiming that Drusilla was the new Venus. Any objections would be Eventually, he even convinced the Senate to declare her a living goddess. In fact, that wasn't the only time he allegedly killed his sister. According to the historian Philip of Sai, when a group of barbarians sent a letter begging Caligula for help, he had Drusilla write a reply. But after she dipped her stylus in an inkwell to sign it, he cut off her fingers and chained her to a chariot like a horse. Then, with her bleeding stump of a hand, he forced her to write a message saying, "You will die because you signed a letter with a seal." That same day, he had her thrown into prison. Perhaps he murdered her in a fit of anger over a missive written with her own blood. Or maybe he thought she deserved punishment for not signing with his stamp of authority instead of her own seal. All we know is that Drusilla was thrown into prison, then taken to Ostia Antica and executed by sword. Supposedly, after he had her killed, Caligula threw himself on her funeral pyre and lamented, "What shall I do without thee? My joy? Without thee? My light? My life? My all?" Before she died, he created a cult in her honor, and afterwards, he kept her spirit alive by commissioning a temple and statues across the empire. And in a shocking display of affection, he dressed up as a woman and rode in a chariot with her. As if this weren't bad enough, Caligula also treated Drusilla's ladies-in-waiting like mistresses, chaining them to chariots like horses and flogging them. To add insult to injury, he made all the female slaves wear a special badge on their clothing, a circle with a crescent moon inside. And if you think that sounds familiar, it's because the symbol of Caligula's debauchery was also used by the goddess Diana, the patron deity of chastity, virginity, and the hunt. But those closest to the couple knew the truth. Apparently, Caligula introduced Drusilla to a mysterious Syrian priestess named Iota, who told the pair that their love was divinely ordained. Then the lovers began planning their future together. Caligula wanted to marry Drusilla, but the Senate would never accept it. So instead, he gave her the title Empress and chained her to chariots like a queen. He even shackled her to chariots like a horse. One writer describes her as fair of face, slender of waist, delicate of limbs, but somewhat too bountiful in other respects. And indeed, according to Cassius Dio, Caligula was extremely controlling of her, forbidding her from bathing or even going to the bathroom alone. There are stories that he wiped her private parts with a silk cloth after intimate moments, and ordered her slaves put to death for daring to touch her body. If Drusilla wanted to attend a party, Caligula would have to go with her. The couple slept in separate beds, but still in the same room. And some sources claim they even shared a single sheet. Many historians argue that it was an unusually sexual relationship from the start. You see, Germanicus was famed as the most handsome man in Rome, the original Greek god of beauty, and his children inherited his looks. Caligula's obsession with Drusilla seemed to be purely romantic, but hers seems to have been more maternal, or perhaps lesbian. Either way, when Tiberius stepped down in favor of Caligula, Drusilla went with him, traveling everywhere in his entourage. And while Tiberius traveled around his villa in Capri, apparently she stayed behind in Rome, but still close by, running the household and sending him erotic poetry every day. Tiberius was reportedly furious about this. His favorite pastime, after all, was sleeping with boys. According to Suetonius, he confronted Caligula about the relationship and threatened to send Drusilla away. But after a single night of pining, Tiberius changed his mind and agreed to allow her to stay. Later, when Germanicus died on military campaign, supposedly Tiberius sent for Drusilla and made her his mistress. The point is, the relationship between Caligula and Drusilla was already an incestuous scandal before Caligula became emperor. So when he took the throne and settled in the palace with his beloved sister, the rest of Rome could probably see where things were going. Beloved by the army, he rose quickly to the throne after the death of Tiberius. In the beginning, the Roman people celebrated. Young, charismatic, charming, Caligula was supposed to be a new golden age. Instead, he became a living nightmare. He didn't just believe he was above the Senate, he believed he was a god. He declared war on Neptune, the god of the sea. He built a palace for his horse, but most disturbingly, while ruling the greatest city in the world, he fell deeply, madly, in love with his sister. Her name was Drusilla. And if you want to know how that drove Rome insane, let's begin at the beginning. When the spoiled yet beloved son of the late Germanicus arrived in Rome, everyone assumed he would be a puppet ruler, manipulated by the real power. His grandmother, Julia Maesa, and her sinister daughter, the formidable Julia Livia. But when Tiberius died, Caligula was only 24 years old, and he was ready to rule. With ambition, intelligence, and ruthlessness, he sent his grandmother into exile and eliminated his mother's entire family, all the while spreading vicious rumors about their plots against him. In fact, he was so successful at this, historians have wondered if he was unexaggerating the threat to get rid of his family and consolidate power. But that was only the beginning of his reign of terror. Enter Drusilla. She was 4 years younger than Caligula and the daughter of Julia and Germanicus. But she wasn't just his sibling. She was also his first love. And soon enough, the whispers started. People saw them holding hands in the palace garden, and they saw Drusilla taking Caligula's arm as they walked together through the forum. But despite all of that, there's no question that Caligula wanted to make Drusilla the most powerful woman in Rome. Sometime during this time, Drusilla became pregnant. This was extremely scandalous, since it was well known that Caligula and Drusilla didn't sleep separately. When news of Drusilla's death reached Egypt, Caligula sent his fleet to bring back her embalmed body. At this point, Caligula was spiraling out of control. And that might seem like the end of the story, but many Romans suspected that Caligula's devoted sister played a part in his demise, too. As for Caligula, he's gone down in history as the quintessential mad emperor, a man whose immense power combined with extreme privilege and a lack of restraint turned him into a monster. Thanks for watching. See you next time.